In 2022, the Dallas Cowboys took a rookie to his limit in the playoffs and proved that he wasn't as perfect as he appeared. In 2023, they would return to Levi's with one mission: to beat the 49ers and prove that they were the better team. It's a rivalry that spans generations. If you were to ask any football fan to name one of the NFL's greatest rivalries, the chances of them naming the Niners versus the Cowboys as one of them would be great. Growing up, even though I didn't like football, my dad did. And as a lifelong Niners fan, he would remind me from time to time that we don't like Dallas in this household. Now, as I've mentioned before, I really became a football fan in 2022. But if I'm being honest, I attached myself more to a single player than I did any team. But that all changed when I followed in my dad's footsteps and became a Niner fan myself. Now, of course, that was because of a certain underdog quarterback, but it didn't really matter to him when I told him. Although, I did have a laugh when I told him I had picked a team, and his immediate response was, "Please don't tell me it's Dallas. I may not make it through that." He laughed, but there was a tiny part of me that wondered. So when the two teams faced each other in the 2022 divisional round, I got to see what the modern day rivalry was like, and that game wasn't really great. The Dallas defense did a great job of keeping pretty contained, and like I mentioned in a previous episode, the Cowboys could have easily won that game. But Purdy did a much better job of keeping the ball safe, while Dak did not. And we really don't need to talk about that last play that Dallas tried to pull off. I mean, legend says that part of Zeke's soul is still trapped in Levi's after he got flattened. Seriously, what were they thinking? Anyway, I really hadn't gotten into all of the news and other content that was available, except for the 3 shows on FS1. First things first, Speak and Undisputed. Now, I've already mentioned those shows in the first episode of the season, so go and give that a watch if you haven't already. So the first 4 weeks of the season flew by, and I hadn't really been paying attention to the schedule. That was, of course, until a segment aired on Undisputed where they were talking about the Week 5 game. The Cowboys were coming back to Levi's for revenge. I watched segments from each of the 3 shows to see what each of them were saying and trying to get a feel for how the media was treating this game. And at the time, it really did seem like this was going to be one of the biggest games of the season. Not only was the game in the coveted Sunday Night Football slot, but both teams were having, for the most part, a dominating season. However, the Cowboys were coming into the game at 3-1 after a blowout win against the Patriots, while the Niners were coming into the game at 4-0 after a decisive win against the Cardinals. Now, it should be said that the 1 in that 3-1 just so happened to be as a result of a loss against the Cardinals, so instantly many people thought that the Niners had the advantage. However, to the Cowboys' credit, their defense had done the job against Purdy in the offense back in the playoffs, so it was safe to assume that after their blowout wins against the Giants, the Jets, and the Patriots, that they were poised to make a stand against an offense that really did seem unstoppable. Except back in the playoffs, they were facing a rookie that had only had, at the time, 6 games under his belt, leading an offense that he was still getting used to. This time, however, they were facing an offense that was more cohesive, with a quarterback who was getting more and more comfortable running the offense, while also getting more and more comfortable being a starting quarterback and a leader. And for the most part, that really wasn't something I was hearing a lot when it came to what the media was saying. Except, I actually did hear a few things from the media, and one of them was from a very unlikely source. Enter Skip Bayless. Listen, say what you want about him. Goodness knows that when I first turned on Undisputed, it took me a good second to get used to him. But when I really sat back and looked at it from a different perspective, I realized that my annoyance with him was my problem. And when I treated it as entertainment rather than hard-hitting sports analysis, I started to enjoy myself watching it a lot more. It's honestly what helped me get past all of the Cowboy talk. And while the lead up to this game was what I thought it was going to be in terms of all of his Cowboy love, it was his take on Brock Purdy that actually made me sit back and gain a little bit of respect for him, because he did something that not a lot of others in the media, at least on FS1, was doing. He was giving Purdy the credit that he had, in my opinion, rightfully earned.
All right, here's the point. Brock Purdy scares me to death going into Sunday night, because the harder I look, the better he looks. The more I want him to mess up, screw up, get exposed, the harder I look for that, the more he does nothing wrong. I'm saying, what does he ever do wrong? You talk about only 5 touchdowns, 0 picks in 4 games. He just does not turn the ball over, and yet he is running away with QBR. He's running away with it. He has surpassed Tua by 6 points. That's a huge gap. He is running away with passer rating. And the key stat that he's running away with exposes all those people who think that he's just a game manager system quarterback, because check this out. On passes thrown over 10 yards this year in the National Football League, he leads the league with 72% completion of 10 or more yards. I'm sorry. Kyle Shanahan keeps trying to tell you, I took the training wheels completely off. We do everything we want to do with this kid because he's shown me again and again, under fire, under pressure, biggest moments, that he will execute whatever play I want to call.
For all of the entertainment that Skip provided leading up to this game, I genuinely believe that this moment was, well, genuine. Now, for all I know, that was just for show. But I choose to believe that he was being genuine in that moment. Now, on the other side of that coin, we have a man by the name of Nick Wright. 49ers fans know exactly who I'm talking about. He is one of the co-hosts of another show on FS1, First Things First. I could probably do an entire episode on Nick Wright, and I don't think that would still be enough. Now, as I acknowledged in the first episode of this season, First Things First was, in my opinion, a hotbed of hot takes, and in all honesty, they mostly came from Nick Wright. But it's weird. Coming from Skip, I've always seen his takes about the Cowboys as entertaining, but when the takes come from Nick Wright, I see nothing but red. Now, in reality, I know that I shouldn't take anything he says seriously, but he has this way of pushing the right buttons. He's like a really good heel in professional wrestling. If you know, you know. And to his credit, he really is good at his job. But to say that he's not a Purdy fan would be a severe understatement. From what I've been able to piece together, his skepticism derives from the fact that he was never a Jimmy G fan.
I know they have the best weapons in the division. With respect to Pitts and London down in Atlanta, they have the best weapons in that division. Also, Atlanta's in the NFC South, so it doesn't matter. I was thinking of the NFC as a whole. Right. I think they have the best coach in the division with respect to Sean McVay, because Kyle Shanahan owns Sean McVay and has shown that the NFC Championship game notwithstanding. The only hurdle is the quarterback. And they showed you last night that nights that Jimmy closes his eyes and wishes upon a star and throws a touchdown instead of a pick, they can look dominant. Yeah. They can look utterly and thoroughly dominant.
A lot of nights like that, Nick.
No, there's not. I mean,
a lot of nights like
there's
that.
Not a lot of nights.
No, actually, there's 34.
Yeah.
No, 32 and 15 is what their record is with Jimmy G starting. And this coach that you think, and he has owned Sean McVay, I'll give you that. But better, I wouldn't call him better than Sean McVay. And Nick, here's the thing about that quarterback. Yeah. I would argue, because again, Geno Smith's gonna turn into a pumpkin within the next 2 weeks, that Jimmy G is playing the best at that position in the division.
Drew, hold on. No, we can't. Hold on. No. You jumped in on me. I gotta jump in real quick.
Let me see.
We are 8 days removed from him self-safetying. We can't have that short of a
Steve
memory.
McNair self-safety.
Right,
I mean, really, I'm not going to hold that against him for the rest of it. It's not going to define his career.
True.
It defined Darren Orlovsky's, because Darren Orlovsky, with all due respect, didn't have much of an NFL career.
Sure.
Jimmy G's been to a Super Bowl, NFC title game, he's been to win.
Away.
So that's not going to define.
He was terrible. He was terrible. They scored.
Lamar Jackson, you just blamed their loss on him yesterday.
Yeah, but he was great for 3 straight weeks. You think Jimmy G's played the best of any quarterback in that division?
Without Jimmy G, they get into the Super Bowl.
Well, yeah, either with Brock Purdy or Baker Mayfield. Listen, they have made that offense idiot-proof, as proven by the fact that Brock Purdy came in yesterday. Honest question. If you were watching on a 17-inch, Samsung from back in the day, and you didn't have HD, and you came in midway through the first quarter and you didn't have sound, would you have known that wasn't Jimmy G out there? I wouldn't have. I'd have been like, a little quick slant to an awesome skill position guy who is then making people miss. I'm like, it is plug and play.
That's an insult to Jimmy G?
No, it is simply saying so I don't know if Brock Purdy is going to be able to be just baseline competent. C.J. Beathard and Nick Mullins and Brian Hoyer obviously were not. But if Purdy could be, or if Baker Mayfield could be, and if Baker can do it anywhere, it would be in that offense, the Niners are a juggernaut. They have the best defense in football. They have the best left tackle in football. They have the best trio of tight end, wide receiver, running back in football. They have all of those things. They just, prior to yesterday, hadn't allowed a point in the second half in a month.
And because he deemed Garoppolo a bad quarterback who looked good under Kyle Shanahan, he immediately fell under the Purdy is only good because of the team around him umbrella. After all, that's what many people were saying about Jimmy G. And while this episode is not really about Nick Wright, trust me, that comes later, I couldn't help but notice the difference in how each show was approaching this game. Skip was being Skip, but I put that down to the fact that he was a biased Cowboys fan, while Nick was coming into this game with a firm belief that Dallas was a much better team with a much better quarterback.
So just get a win and it's an A.
Yeah, I don't think they need an A game because these are two evenly matched teams. The Cowboys don't have to play perfect to beat the Niners unless the Niners play perfect. Now, I do think the Cowboys' defense needs to play damn close to an A game for them to play as well as I think they're going to play. Most notably, going to have to be the first team all season to try to mitigate Christian McCaffrey's impact on the game. But I love the Cowboys in this spot. I love them plus the 3.5. I like them a lot to win outright. I think the Niners are flying a bit too high. I think Dallas matches up really well with them, and I think we are going to see the Niners tested for the first time since those last two playoff games. The Cowboys playoff game was an excellent game. The fact the Cowboys missed an extra point, Dak made a couple critical mistakes that were caught, Purdy made a couple critical mistakes that weren't, and the Niners ended up having control of the game starting in the fourth quarter and rode it to the finish line. I think the Cowboys are primed to put a level of defensive pressure on San Francisco that they have not faced all year long.
The one thing they did have in common, though, was the fact that both of them gave the Niners zero chance of winning this game. And can I just say that watching that game as it was happening was one of the best experiences I've ever had watching a game on TV, because right before everyone's eyes, Brock Purdy was proving everyone who said that he and the Niners were going to lose absolutely wrong. So let's talk about the game. First, I want to touch on something I mentioned in a previous episode that was really on full display in this game. The Niners defense basically locked CeeDee Lamb out of this game. He had 4 catches on 5 targets for a total of 49 yards. He was basically a non-factor in this game, which was concerning for the team because Lamb was the best receiver on it. So with his main weapon all but taken away, Dak was forced to spread the ball around, and while that did lead to a touchdown early in the game, that only resulted in about 161 yards of passing offense. Purdy, though, as mentioned before, was not afraid to spread the ball around, and in this game, he didn't really focus on one main target. Well, I suppose that's not exactly 100% true. Of all the narratives that has surrounded Purdy up until this point, the one that could be easily debunked was this one. Purdy doesn't elevate the team elevates him. And while I completely understand that stats don't tell the whole story, what stats can do is show how something has improved from one point in time to another. And that brings me to George Kittle. See, I believe, after having watched him play and seeing a lot of his highlights, that he will go down as one of the best tight ends of all time. And this really isn't a debate that I want to engage in at this moment, so go ahead and save your comments on that. Having been with the team since 2017, he's had some really, really good seasons and some so-so seasons. But one thing I noticed was that while his production has always been good to great, there was a dramatic change in his production following week 13 of the 2022 season. Now, if only I could put my finger on why. What could possibly have happened in week 13 of the 2022 season? Joking aside, before week 13, he had only had a total of 4 touchdowns. But after week 13, he scored 7 more, bringing his season total to 11. But the one thing that he had never been able to achieve in his 6 seasons in the NFL was scoring more than 2 touchdowns in a single game. That was until week 5 of the 2023 season. You see, 3 of the 4 touchdowns that Purdy threw in this game went to one man, George Kittle. I don't know about you, but that sounds a lot like elevation to me. But who was the other player that Purdy threw to in order to get that 4th touchdown? Just some guy named Kyle Juszczyk. You know, the guy that plays for that well-known receiving position of fullback. All in all, while the Cowboys were able to put up 161 passing yards of offense, the Niners surpassed that, managing to put up 253. And while we're talking about passing, there's another narrative that I wanted to mention briefly that I'll go more in depth about in a future episode. It started with Brock Purdy only throws short yard passes over the middle and lets Debo and Kittle do the rest of the work, which, yeah, that is a big part of the 49ers scheme. That's what they're supposed to do. But many were also adding this to it. He's always throwing to wide open receivers. And I'll be honest with you, there was a point where I believed that myself. There were times that I would sit there and watch games thinking, how is no one around him? To me, it looked easy for Purdy. And then after this game, I stumbled upon a YouTube channel called The QB School. The creator of the channel, JT O'Sullivan, is a former NFL quarterback, and he would break down QB performances, giving very detailed analysis on each relevant play, good or bad. And it was this game and his analysis that really opened my eyes to what Purdy was actually doing. When you're watching football on television, the cameras are trained to follow the ball when it's thrown. But if you actually look at the footage from the All-22 view, then you see the entire play as it's happening. And this is where I learned the term anticipation. Obviously, I knew what the term meant for normal everyday speech, but I didn't realize that it had a slightly different meaning when describing a skill that a quarterback should have. And in watching his breakdown of certain plays of this game, and then rewatching the highlights, it really made me see Purdy in a different light. Some of the throws to Ayuk and Debo were made well before either of them broke out of their respective routes, and that's what's seen on the All-22. But in the highlights from the game, it really does appear that Purdy is throwing to them while they are wide open. I guess it just goes to show you that you can't believe everything you see on TV. Now, not to be outdone on the rushing side of things, both Christian McCaffrey and Jordan Mason were able to score a touchdown each, though it should be said that CMC was pretty much contained for most of the game. It's interesting though. While I was extremely happy that the Niners dominated the game, the one thing I was looking forward to the most was what the media was finally going to say about Brock Purdy and the Niners offense. And while watching Skip completely melt down over his team yet again,
I wore it during last night's game like it was going to actually bring me some good luck, maybe even him too. This is what I did with it with about 2 minutes left in 49ers 42, Cowboys 10.
You did all that? You waited that long?
Yeah. I thought about throwing Micah's number 11 into the trash also, but I spared him. But now I will not be spared by Richard Sherman and Keyshawn Johnson. Bad morning to you two.
You will not.
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to warn both of you.
Please.
Keyshawn always says, you got to slow your roll. I'm going to warn both of you.
Please warn me.
As you well know, it's a long season. It's only just now getting
short,
started.
though, Skip.
I will give you this. The 49ers last night maxed out. I will give you this. We crapped out. They played virtually the best game they can play. There were little things here and there. Brock Purdy missed a couple of throws. He got a couple batted down at the line of scrimmage. But overall, I'm not sure they can play much better than they played last night. All right. Now, here's the point about last night. I knew what my quarterback was and what he wasn't. I've been saying this for 3 years. I keep trying to just barely cling to him, and I just barely hang on. And I go by a New Jersey, and I say, okay, maybe this time he can stay out of the way, and maybe he can get off a little hot, and maybe he can get in some comfort zone, and maybe they can actually run the football around him and take some of the heat and discomfort off him, because he never looks comfortable against San Francisco at all. This is 3 straight losses, the last 2, obviously, the previous 2 in the playoffs. You look at his QBR, it's under 50. It's a very good defense he's up against, but they have his psychological number. He is deer in headlights.
the one thing that was a pleasant surprise was actually what Nick Wright had to say. And while he was still far away from becoming a Purdy fan, knowing that he could be relatively objective was a nice surprise.
The exercise I ask people to do when Niners are in a standalone game is take out a little piece of paper, have the column, wows and yikes. Wow throws, give it a check mark. Yikes throws, give it a check mark. And so I did it last night. Brock Purdy last night, 5 wows, 1 yikes. He was excellent. Brock Purdy last night, fair is fair. I said all week I wanted to see him do it against the defensive caliber of the Cowboys. I am not now going to sit up here and be like, well, actually, the Cowboys defense isn't quite as good. I'm not going to do that. Maybe they're not the best defense in football like I thought, but they didn't lose Micah before the game or DeMarcus Lawrence. The Cowboys defense, he was excellent.
Yeah.
There is the first touchdown to Kittle was a great play where he breaks out of the pocket. He had a couple other really nice ones.
With a 10th regular season win under his belt, Purdy was truly looking like one of the best quarterbacks in the league, and it was looking like the Cinderella story of Mr. Relevant was headed toward a very happy ending. But the unfortunate part of any Cinderella story is that eventually that clock has to strike midnight.